public radio satellite service. Music is by Fred Michael Davis. Native Voice Network, the Native American Radio Network.
Support for KBMF comes from the Butte Frame Shop and Gallery, located on Main Street in Uptown Butte, just across from the Pecan Noodle Parlor. The Butte Frame Shop offers framing and matting services for holidays, works of art, and more. Reach them by phone at 782-7710.
And you are tuned in to KBMF LP Butte, 102.5 FM, and maybe streaming live at butteamericaradio.org/stream. And maybe you are joining us today on Facebook or Twitch for our live stream conversation. We appreciate your participation this afternoon. This is Ainsley Sevier, and you are listening to Post-Orthodoxy. With me in the studio today is my wonderful co-host, Citizen DJ Dark Sevier.
Hi there, folks.
Your DJ name includes your real name.
Yeah, right.
Which I've had to just kind of give up my my DJ name, Redheaded Jill,
yeah,
in light of the coronavirus.
Oh, just because you're not doing the show that normally would be in this slot.
Right. We've converted the 5 to 6 p.m. regularly scheduled kid co-hosted talk radio show, The Jolly Roger, into another episode, a shorter episode of Post-Orthodoxy, which is a show about changing our minds, or getting out of reality bubbles, moving beyond fundamentalisms and not being scared about it.
Moving out of reality bubbles and into social distancing.
Which is another kind of bubble.
It definitely is.
But you can continue to expand your mind while retracting your social sphere.
Oh.
Ooh, that's a good tagline. Yeah, that'll be our pandemic era tagline. Expand your mind while retracting your social sphere. We have 8 people joining us today on Facebook and 6 people listening online.
That's nice.
On KBMF, butteamericaradio.org/stream. What are we talking about today, Dark? We're only here for an hour before Big Damn C.
Yeah, it's an hour and it's going to go really quick.
It's going to go real quick. It always goes real quick.
Oh, but, we take notes in the course of the week of maybe this is a thing, maybe this is a thing we can talk about. And then sometimes the thing just comes in and railroads through and you're like, oh, I guess we're doing this.
Right. There's been a lot of current events lately. I thought it might be kind of nice to take a break from the coronavirus chatting because we've been doing that a lot recently.
We're entering into the 5th hour of being on the radio talking about coronavirus this week. So let's not do it.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's so much.
We did spend several hours at the station already this morning. We recorded a conversation with meta-modernist philosopher Hansi Freinot.
True.
We haven't
from
had a
Sweden.
Chance. Yeah, from Sweden, from Geneva.
Mm-hmm. Wait, Geneva's in Switzerland.
He's in Geneva, Switzerland.
Okay.
I
thought he was in the Alps.
That's what. Well, I think the Alps sort of.
Anyway, he's in Europe.
He's in Europe, and he did a nice long interview on meta-modernism, the books that he's writing around it, the philosophy.
Which we're really excited to. We're going to break that interview up into delicious chunks, edible chunks, and spread it around through our radio shows over the next couple of weeks.
I thought we were just going to do an interview and then air the interview, but when you get down the road of philosophy, we're just going to take some bite-sized chunks.
It's a long road.
We're going to have to snap off a little piece.
Yeah, and discuss it with our audience.
Mentally masticate that.
Yeah. Rob McLean says hi, and so does Zach Monder.
All right.
Thanks,
Zach
guys.
Monder.
Jody Salazar, are you guys going to talk about how delusional people are in support of Trump's knowledge about all of this?
Well, that is interesting.
That is a very loaded question.
Are we going to do that in particular?
I think we just talked about it just by reading that question.
I think it's true.
Yeah.
We just summed up that whole thing right there.
Yeah. I do think that a lot of my fellow citizens are just blindly supporting anything Trump says, and that's unfortunate. And unfortunately also, Trump acted like the coronavirus was not a problem for a couple of really important months that would have saved a lot of lives.
Right. I did watch a friend of mine go from, this is all a hoax because the president
said it's not a hoax.
And we should just go on about our lives. And I took him into a private message and said, it's not about you getting sick, it's about being a vector. And he's like, man, he just blew me off. And I said, well, let's see how this little post weathers the next couple of weeks.
Right. And like
I'll
2
check-
days later,
I'll check back in with you later.
2 days later, he's like, stay away from people you don't know, and if you come near me or my family, I will shoot you.
That was the subtext.
I don't know if it was really sub.
He never mentioned shooting people specifically.
Right. He said he would exercise his constitutional right to protect his family since the government told you to stay away from him.
Since the government told me to stay away from him. So now he's going to enforce what the government said.
Mm-hmm.
With a gun. So like his idea of social distancing is if you get within 6 feet or 10 feet, depending on who you're listening to, I'm going to shoot you.
And like we said, not incredibly subtext.
Not really subtext.
And there's been a lot of conversations, are people going to freak out and hurt each other, or are they going to band together and help each other? And the movies all show people freaking out and
Right.
crashing through marketplaces and driving their cars over barricades because that's what makes a great disaster movie.
Well, if you have a disaster movie and people are just standing around calmly helping people
Right. Taking groceries to elderly.
while the monster runs down the street.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't make it's not good
Doesn't make
cinema,
a great
right?
movie.
But my experience of being in disaster after disaster after disaster was in the Los Angeles uprising after the Rodney King scenario. That was 3 days. Martial law broke out. I was in the Northridge earthquake. That was a total shutdown of the city. You could see the stars from Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a 100-year flood in Los Angeles where all the cars got washed down Laurel Canyon like toys into a big pile at the bottom. I've been in major, Northern California forest fire situations where everybody has to do something different. My experience.
You have like a fully stamped disaster passport.
Yeah, I've got it stamped a few different places. My experience is that I find people behave better. They're more
Like
open.
in real life, people help each other.
In real life, people tend to help each other. They tend to have their empathy tuned way up. And for some people, it feels like that is the thing that can make them feel better, is to help somebody else not feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's physically, emotionally. That's been my experience. There's bad actors sometimes. There are some moments where some folks do some things that's disruptive or dangerous or destructive. That happens. But the overall feeling, the overall experience that I've had is that people tend to be their better selves when disaster occurs. So I was trying to inject that into my friend's timeline. He was saying basically, now's the time to gather around your family and make sure everybody stays 6 feet away or I'm going to enforce it. And I was like, wow, that's a really different approach to this whole thing. It went from, it is a hoax, and then the guy that told you it was a hoax. And I think he's probably one of our QAnon friends.
Well, I just feel badly because that kind of reaction to a crisis is indicative of a really stressful worldview. Like a person that reacts to a crisis by battening down the hatches against their neighbors is a person that's not having a very good time. They're defending themselves from everybody all the time.
Definitely fear-based.
Yeah.
That's not like maybe fear-based. That's just definitely fear-based because there's been no reason. So now he's just anticipating crackheads trying to steal his tractor or something, I guess. I don't know.
Or his children?
He doesn't have any kids. He just said my family, which he doesn't have. He just has extended family.
Right.
His dad. I don't know what his family is. But it's the trope. It's like now is the chance where I get to be an American hero with my gun and protect my freedoms. That's really what the subtext was. And I thought it was an interesting approach. Coming from somebody who 2 days ago was making fun of everybody else.
It's tough, and there are a lot
of social distancing and trying to flatten the curve.
The information is out there. We've been talking a lot recently. Post-Orthodoxy kind of goes through themes over time of, recurring things that we bring up during our shows. We have a goal of education, both for ourselves and for our friends, and we have a goal of opening our minds and broadening our perspectives. And one of the themes that comes up a lot is recently is that there is a huge demographic on the planet, at least in the West, where most people are used to having internet access now. There's a huge demographic on the planet of people who spent the first 30 or 40 years of their life not using the internet. even the first 20 years of your life are really integral for how you look for information. So if you spent the first 20 or 30 or 40 years of your life getting information from pastors, parents, teachers, and the news, it's hard to start a new habit of realizing that you can go find your own information now.
Ooh.
And the internet is available to everyone in the West, nearly everybody in the US. It's a luxury, it's a privilege, and it gives us the ability to compare and contrast things people have said, and compare and contrast what they said now with what they said in the past, what they said now with what their actual record of action is. Coming from the conservative Christian worldview that I grew up in, there's a parable for that you will know a tree by its fruit. A good tree does not produce bad fruit. And it's easy to go and search for information about what the president has said now and in the past, and
Right.
compare that to his actions.
That was a nice Fox mashup of all of them, making sure that the early Fox folks are talking about how this is all just a Democratic hoax. That's what, yeah, it's just a Democratic hoax. And now they're all, it's like some adults came and sat Fox and Trump down and said, you can't, that's dangerous what you're doing, you can't do it anymore.
You can't just keep telling people it's a hoax when their lives are on the line.
I don't know who the adult in the room was to sit down Fox News and Trump and change the mind.
I know this sells, but guess what? A pandemic will also sell news.
Right.
So let's jump tracks from it's a Democratic hoax to it's a pandemic, and you will still keep making sales. Don't worry.
I like some stuff that's already coming up in our comment feed.
Yeah, people were like, oh, they don't know what to talk about. We've got ideas.
Oh,
and
good.
The biggest idea that we're getting from Rob McLean and Jody Salazar is in Illinois. I don't know if Rob is here or in Michigan or Wisconsin or wherever he lives now, but they're talking about ways that artists and performers are sharing their art forms through the internet. If you want to talk about groups that are hit most heavily, of course there are wage earners who have had to quit their jobs, or either because of children that have been sent home from school or because their job has been shut down temporarily.
Bar, restaurant.
But there are especially people that rely on gatherings to survive financially, and those are bartenders and servers and artists.
It's a double whammy in the big cities because a lot of the artists are also working as bartenders and servers.
Right.
So they've been hit.
So it's like gig life, and I think this is another one of those things that we do as education a lot on Post-Orthodoxy is look up some statistics on how many people in the country are actually living in what you would call poverty. It's actually a lot of people.
Yeah, they're not going to get, if Congress sends out a check, they're going to probably send it out to people who did their taxes last year. And a lot of people
make
who
so
do the
little.
gig life, they don't bother with paying the taxes because they're not going to get much back, and so they don't bother with it. So
well, and also, isn't it like if you make under a certain amount, there's like no
it's really
point.
irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting because I sort of feel like artists are the canary in the coal mine. They're the ones that I saw take to Facebook first. Well, I'm not doing my gig tonight. I guess I'll do my DJ set online. Well, I'm not doing my yoga class today, so I guess I'll do my yoga class online.
I'll teach it online. I've seen a lot of people putting stuff out online. People are offering homeschool classes for parents that are suddenly confronted with needing to be an educator for their children, which is clashing with the narrative that's been going on for the last 100 years that you are not qualified to educate your own child. And so people are like, I need to find classes online, and there are a lot of resources going out there, most of them for pay what you can donations.
Right, and so a number of folks out there are listening to us on radio. Some people are streaming us online.
On the real live radio.
Or watching us on Twitch. If you are not if you're not involved with the dialogue on Twitch or Facebook, I wanted to let you know what some of these links were. It's all one word. It's called, this is Rob McLean's link, COVID Concert Series. So that is a group, and I guess it's like an open mic. You can sign up for a slot.
Oh, that's neat. So that's really important because the way that the internet works, for those of you that haven't maybe gotten into Twitch, into streaming as a content creator, but are maybe somebody that consumes content online or doesn't use the internet very much, but the way that it works is the longer that you can stay live, the more chance you have of getting viewership to come and see your video and potentially send tips to the various performers. And so the Missoula Sequester Fest is a
Different.
noon to midnight series, just like the COVID concert series, where artists are going to come online at the. I think they're using the same stream so that they can keep the audience
Yes, they're using
going
the same.
through the evening.
I think they are there. So we've got that. We've got the Missoula Sequester Fest. That's two different words. That's March 28th is the date where this is going to be happening.
Mm-hmm.
That is available for your Facebook viewing pleasure, as well as the COVID concert series, which does not seem to be tied to a locale. So that is something where anybody in the country
That's fascinating.
can join the group,
Mm-hmm.
sign up for a time, and then
Keep
it's
performance
crowdsourcing your audience. So
Mhm.
it's people beyond your pool of regular.
They might not know about you as a band.
Right. But this is where you get to introduce you. This could end up being
Actually, really
something
helpful.
really interesting.
And then each band is putting their digital tip jar up online as they
Right.
play. So a link to their PayPal, a link to where you can buy their album. I know our dear friends from here, they're not from Butte, but they've come through Butte many times. Snailmate has had
Yes.
to cancel their entire tour. They live out of their van and tour.
Yeah.
And they had just redone their whole van to do like a 30-show tour, including South by Southwest, which is
Yeah.
a big step for a band.
Right.
And they had just bought a bunch of t-shirts,
For
like
the tour.
invested in, so they're like, we really need help. I know you guys love us as a band. If you have the ability, buy one of our t-shirts and we'll send it to you free shipping. That way we can get rid of our South by Southwest t-shirts
Right.
that like are useless, and you can have some band merch and you can support the band.
Even though I said maybe we wouldn't talk about the, we're talking about what's happening right now, really.
Coronavirus tangential.
It's tangential. The post that I made before, there was a quote, which I did not attribute, but it's to Milton Friedman, who's a guy who has some wonderful ideas on economy and some in media and some terrible ideas, in my opinion. Oh, some of his ideas didn't weather well over time.
Before you jump to the new topic,
Yes.
I want to
It's
share
not
one
a
last.
topic, but yes.
It isn't?
No.
Okay, well, one last performance link for those of
Yeah,
you that
do
might
it.
be interested and have access to the internet. Under normal circumstances, Willie Nelson would be hosting the annual Luck Reunion Anti-Festival in his backyard this week in Luck, Texas.
Right.
With the show canceled because of the pandemic, organizers are instead holding a virtual concert tonight, and it's called Till Further Notice.
Oh, nice.
A number of acts are performing, including Willie Nelson and his sons Lucas and Micah, Lucinda Williams, Paul Simon, and Eddie Brickell, Margot Price.
Brickell.
Sorry, obviously
wait.
I don't know that person.
Say it, Edie Brickell.
Edie Brickell.
That's for some people who don't know who Eddie Brickell is.
Margot Price, Jeremy Ivy, Nathaniel Ratliff, and Jewel. There's more of a lineup even beyond that. It starts tonight, March 19th at 4 p.m. Pacific time or 7 p.m. Eastern time. That's 5 p.m. Montana time and 6 p.m. Illinois time.
Doing some math.
Yep, doing math in my eyeballs right now.
Mhm.
And it'll go until, it'll go a few hours, 4 or 5 hours. And there are various, so I shared that link in our Facebook live stream, but there are various ways that you can go. And you can support with a digital tip jar, which will be divided equally and transparently among all performers. And if an artist feels like they're coming from a place of financial abundance, they have the choice to choose to donate their share of the tip to an artist that is more in need than themselves or a charity of their choice.
Great. Thinking of, you had something we were going to talk about,
I did.
and we got some time. We can get to it. But I also found this other sort of tangential.
I like bridges. Post-Orthodoxy is all about
Milton
bridges.
Friedman, and the quote was, "Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around." And that's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is people who the first feeling is, oh no, the restaurant is closed. I don't have a job anymore.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
Yeah.
This is also one of those moments where new things occur. New opportunities arrive. There's different ways to, I hate to use the word capitalize, but there are different ways to to help out and sustain yourself while sustaining others.
Right. Your skills can blossom into new areas that were maybe overcrowded with people before.
Right, and so we just sort of waded into this scenario, and I think over the next few days, I think these concert series, these sort of virtual open mics, are remarkable. This is an opportunity. You have a captive audience. You have people who maybe normally wouldn't be browsing Facebook are like, well, that's something interesting.
Right.
Maybe I'll go to a virtual open mic, and then they get to get exposed to artists from all these different places. Maybe they'll find a new artist. Maybe an artist will find a new patron. Maybe that event will be something that endures beyond the crisis.
Yeah.
So that's one of those little examples that I've been looking for, that at this time we may be discovering all kinds of new things because we have to.
And those things can live on
Right.
Beyond the pandemic without feeling badly that they began because of the pandemic.
Right.
A lot of the time, and this is something I've been pondering in my personal life lately, is like, what if the skills that I have were earned under duress? What if, what if I'm a heavily empathetic person because no one listened to me growing up? Is that, am I naturally empathetic? Am I really an empathetic person, or am I only an empathetic person because no one helped me?
Right.
And does that make it a real skill? And so we're learning these
I'll say
things.
yes.
Thanks. It's still a philosophical thing to ponder.
Yes.
We're learning all these things and coming together in new ways because of a crisis. But that doesn't mean that those things that we're learning and those new skills that we're acquiring and those coming togethers are tainted by the crisis.
Right. No, I think we have opportunities. There's opportunities, new avenues. There's pause for consideration, and things will come out of that. And that's what I'm sort of keeping my eyes on the horizon for, is like, what's the new weird things that are happening now because we have to.
Yeah.
And I think that could be, I'm looking at artist stuff, but I think there's all kinds of opportunities. Not the opportunity that you actually had a cachet of hand sanitizer in your garage and now you're gonna gouge your neighbors.
Right.
I think that's indicative of old school capitalism. It's indicative of a lot of the systems that we've been working under for a while. I think there's opportunity for new systems and new opportunities to land in people, because people are looking for something to do. There's a lot of people looking for something to do. People are saying, what's some good documentaries? I saw that.
Yeah, great documentary stream.
That's what's going on with documentaries. I think this is a good time to, we have a pause. Right now, everything's not too terrible, right? We've had to pause what we're doing. Some of us are going to get sick. Some of us are going to die. We don't know what any of that is. Right now, we have this awesome moment of taking a break from, like, what we're doing to ourselves is what we're seeing, like with the canals in Venice. You've seen the images of the canals in Venice. They're clear now, and now there's dolphins swimming into them. There's, like, you saw maybe the smog map in China, where suddenly
greatly diminished over January and February.
Greatly diminished smog map. So there's things that we didn't think, when people were talking about, we'll never be able to change our carbon footprint. We just did. We did it for a minute. And that's something that people didn't think was, it showed the dramatic results of changing our behavior for a moment.
Right.
And I think I find that encouraging.
Yeah. I really want to take a step back, and maybe those folks that are listening online can help us with this, because I am becoming more and more aware of, in a time of crisis, what a privilege and a luxury it is to have access to the internet.
Right.
And I know that we have a lot of KBMF listeners who don't use computers or the internet.
Right.
It's a demographic thing, and sometimes it's a choice thing, and sometimes it's an availability thing. I kind of always thought about people that don't like to use the internet, that was nice that they could make that choice. That maybe they grew up the first 40, 50, 60 years of their life not having a computer or using the internet, and they probably got different skills of functioning in the world than I do. They probably have more recipes memorized, those sorts of things. It wasn't a derogatory thing to me or to the people that don't use the internet, that we were just different. And I didn't think of it as a disadvantage until the last week. For instance, we had a gentleman call in we did a 2-hour news special yesterday with Michael Oakes here on KBMF.
Yes.
About the coronavirus and factoids so far, the timeline so far, and then we just swapped ideas. Thankfully, through our live stream, people were contributing ideas and links and charts and resources that we could share. But we had a gentleman call in who was like, how many people are sick in Butte?
Yeah,
I don't know how many people are sick in Butte. And I was like, you can go to the Butte Silver Bow website. And he's like, I don't use the internet. And by his voice, he was of the demographic of people who oftentimes just didn't bother getting on the computer internet wave.
Right.
Meaning an older person.
Right.
But at that point, I realized like there is a chasm. There is a chasm of self-care ability.
Right.
That is not, this gentleman is not going to find out that Willie Nelson is doing a free concert online. That might be really encouraging to him right now. But if he doesn't have a computer, he probably also can't go and listen to the Willie Nelson concert online because the library is closed.
Right.
So what are some ways that those of us with information abundance and connectivity abundance can create a bridge for members of our community who are operating from a place of information scarcity and connectivity scarcity? I'll start out, I saw on Facebook that, that somebody was going around the neighborhood, an able-bodied young woman with no kids or elderly people in her care was going around putting a card under everybody's door that said, my name is so-and-so, this is my phone number, I live in your area, if you need someone to pick up groceries or prescriptions for you, please call me. And that was a way to reach out tangibly in the real world, you know, not just being able to put up a notice on Facebook or on the newspaper website. Like, we don't know how much longer the newspaper is going to publish. It might all have to go down for a while. How can we be connected with each other and reach out to and have empathy for the situations of those of us that are experiencing connectivity scarcity and information scarcity because they don't use the internet.
Operating in different bubbles. Yeah, I think it's important to try to imagine what is going on for some other people, because as I'm saying, I'm encouraged. I'm trying to see the silver lining to the gray cloud. Jody commented that as an empath, it's a rough time, right? So I get that as well. I mean, I was talking about my friend earlier who went from it's a hoax to looks like pretty paranoid fear, like terror, paranoia and terror.
Which comes out as bluster.
Yeah, very blustery. So I know there's a lot of people dealing with it in a lot of different ways. And I don't know if this show is not here to solve everybody's problems. We're just offering perspectives. And I think in the midst of feeling like everything is terrible, I think it might be useful to hear that maybe there's another way to look at it. Take it or leave it, I guess.
I wish that I was just thinking, like, what would be something, gosh, it's so fascinating, especially as a visual person, I'm seeing all kinds of diagrams in my head. We are both exploding outward into a vast network of connectivity through the internet and reverting and flowering downwards into more tangibly connected physical communities, town by town and neighborhood by neighborhood. The internet is enabling us to connect and support worldwide, and people are also finding ways to connect with each other locally. And I'm thinking, like, I wish that I had an old desktop computer. I have an extra living room downstairs.
Right.
I would love to set up an internet cafe that was like single use internet cafe, one person at a time, and I wipe it all down in between, you know, but like something like that where people who maybe they just need to know things and they become aware that the internet is a way to know things, but they don't have access to it. I don't know. I was just trying to think. I mean, that's something that somebody could provide for their neighborhood. You can't help everybody, and sometimes in this extremely expanded age of worldwide awareness, we feel like if the thing that I'm doing can't help a lot of people, then it's not valuable. But if several people help a few people each, it will spread everywhere.
That seems to be that's what I've been seeing. I know people, the world they live in depends on what eyeballs they're looking through. But that's what I've been seeing.
Yeah.
I know that there is a lot of anxiety. we talk often about the reality tunnel of the Facebook feed, your news feed. The kind of folks you hang out with, the kind of folks you interact with, define this time for you if you're spending a lot of time on Facebook. And it's important to check yourself and also know that there are other Facebook feeds that are telling a very different story about what people are dealing with and going through right now.
Think about how many friends that you have on your timeline. Maybe say you have 600 friends. How many of those do you see regularly? Maybe take a break from your timeline and go through your friends list and see if, Jody's talking about being an empath. It's really, really difficult when you have a deep sense of being able to feel other people's problems. To be feeling so much pain going on around the world, especially when you feel like you maybe don't have any extra left to give.
Right.
To help people. But going through, and if necessary, this is something I've been saying a lot this week, it's quite possible that you have anxiety or panic about the pandemic.
Right.
And that's okay. It's important to acknowledge that you might be terrified or scared or anxious, because then you will be able to help yourself.
I've had the privilege of seeing a few friends of mine in my timeline, friends of mine from Los Angeles, for example, who were artists, who just realized in real time on their post that that's what was going on with them.
I've found
their anxiety and their fear was turning them into, was giving them an experience, and they realized, oh, I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
And just sometimes the realization that you're having a bit of a freak out can be enough to give you the objectivity to reset.
Oh, yeah.
So
you have to acknowledge where you are at if you're going to do anything about it.
Has anybody out there heard of like a COVID virus hotline? I mean, I imagine like a suicide hotline, there must be
like
some chat room where people are like, I don't know what's going on and I'm having a freak out.
I need someone.
Somebody talk me down.
Yeah, somebody talk me down from freaking out.
I know that there was a, on Reddit, there was I follow a number of therapy subreddits, and on Reddit, there was a COVID-19 therapy subreddit.
I'll go look one up right now.
So that people who are having anxieties can at least express them.
Right.
Sometimes it's enough to express it to yourself.
To just be able to say, I'm scared.
You need to express it. You need to have a witness. You need a witness to your experience for it to be real for you. So I think it's been useful for me, because I'm not having that experience right now, to watch other people do it. So I feel like, okay, that's something to keep in check. For myself, should I start to go down a panic road, that I need to be aware of how I'm perceiving, not just be caught up in what I'm perceiving.
The CDC has a really fantastic resource, and I wish that I could just make their resources available to everyone, because it's not just, here's what it is and here's how it spreads. They're giving you information for how to protect yourself, how to protect your family,
right,
how to set up healthcare standards in your home. If somebody in your home is sick, like handing them their food through the door, giving them their own separate cleaning supplies for their room, these sorts of things.
Yeah.
They also have a page on managing stress and anxiety, things that you can do to support yourself. Take breaks from hearing any news, including social media. Take care of your body, deep breaths, stretching, meditation. Try to eat healthy meals, get some exercise, get sleep, make time to unwind. Think of activities that you enjoy and take time to do them. Connect with other people, such as making phone calls. And then they talk about ways to reduce stress for children, and for people who are first responders, and for people who survivor's remorse. Like, if your part of the world was in quarantine,
right,
and you're getting out of it now, and you're struggling with the fact that people all over are still suffering, what can you do? Sadness or anger about people that didn't make it, or things that you missed out on. Like, people are really angry and sad about vacations that they've had to cancel, trips to see loved ones, extremely important work engagements. There's a phone number, Mental Health Services Administration's Disaster Distress Helpline, 800-985-5990.
And I imagine you'll cut and paste that into the Facebook comments feed for folks that want to reference that later.
And that phone number, again, for people who don't have access to the internet, is 800-985-5990. If
All
if you would like to talk to somebody about the distress arising from this pandemic situation.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's some useful information.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the other thing?
The other thing.
The notes that you saw that were written. No, that was written actually this morning when we
so long ago.
We were having that. We were doing that nice interview with Hansi Freina, and you were inspired to jot down some notes.
Yeah, I was.
Which the note, I made a post on Facebook announcing the show, like saying, hey, we're going to do this show from 5 to 6. And I had the quote from our economist friend, but now there was another quote that I posted because of what you were going to talk about, or the notes that you took. And it's a quote from Huey Long that is maybe a little misleading. In terms of the notes that you took on the idea of every person being a king.
Mm-hmm.
This notion.
Yeah, let me hear your quote, and then I will talk about, I'll muddle through the things that came up for me in our interview with Hansi.
Right. There was a guy named Huey Long, if you don't know who Huey Long was. He was a Louisiana politician, really great at rhetoric, populist, got people jacked up. He had a very.
Does jacked up mean excited?
Yeah, I got people
or
excited.
Messed up?
He was like he was a populist speaker
I see.
that had a lot of he had a big powerful fan base. Anyway, his quote was, "I am for the poor man. All poor men, black and white, they all got to have a chance. They got to have a home, a job, a decent education for their children. Every man a king. That's my slogan." And that idea of, I grew up with my parents graduated in the 1950s, so the American dream was really big. The idea that every man was a king, every house was a castle, that America was totally free.
You say a lot, everybody could be middle management.
Everybody could be, well, no, that's the neoliberal promise.
Oh.
The promise of my parents was everybody was going to be the boss. That was the goal, right? That's why you went and got a college education. You started your business so you could be a tycoon. Everybody had the potential. The only reason you weren't a boss of a big company is because you just didn't work hard enough. That was the general trope.
Is that where that stereotype came from? That if you're not doing well, it must be because you're not working hard enough?
You live in the land of the free, full of opportunity. If you're not rich, you just
haven't been working
didn't work hard enough.
Gosh.
Right? That's the trope. And when the system in this country started to shift through various trade deals, through various political, social movements, it became clear to a lot of people that they were not going to be kings with their own castle. And the idea meant to be metaphorical, and that there was nobody over you, right? There was no overlord. It was a democracy, and you could do what you wanted. And I think history's moved on from that premise.
But
the neoliberal
those people
promise,
are still
they're
alive.
still with us.
Like there's a huge demographic of millions of people in the U.S. that grew up with that dream.
Right. Yes. So that idea of manifest destiny, basically, that's the idea of manifest destiny, is you just go out and take it, is not current. But that still lives in, I think, people's ideas of aspiration and who they are and what they can be or what they weren't. So the idea of every person being a king, do you want to talk about the notes you took?
I do.
In relation to this very populist idea of what that meant from like the 30s and 40s.
Okay. Right. If we're speaking of the people that are still alive today, that living and oftentimes still completely thriving members of society who grew up with that dream, or maybe even their parents raised them with that dream because their parents grew up with that dream. So it's really two generations of people.
That's what I was fed.
Like 40s, 50s, and up of the U.S. that it was like, if you work hard, you will succeed, and you should have the opportunity to.
That's kind of a boomer thing.
Quote unquote succeed, having a very specific business-oriented definition.
Very, very much so.
Right. We don't mean succeed by be a happy artist in a cabin somewhere.
No, the ideas of success were fairly business-oriented, generally speaking.
Right. And so people under 40 are having different priorities and different
Yes.
lifestyle choices and are maybe like, actually, I'm only going to live 80 years. I want to have a good time.
Right. I'd rather have experiences than build up for some pension that might not be there when it's time for me
Right.
to get it. Yeah.
Maybe I want to do the things that I love in my life right now rather than waiting to do the things that I love until I'm 60 when I don't have as much energy and a broken hip.
I see it happening all the time.
Oh, it happens all the time. People retire and then they can't remember what they wanted to do when they were 25.
Yeah, the impetus to do it isn't there anymore either.
It's not the same.
Yeah.
There was a model that I was told about a long time ago where a most ideal situation would be an older successful person finances a younger successful person, a younger person's fire. Young people have the fire, and oftentimes by the time people hit a certain age, they have the financial abundance to be able to fund the fire.
Right.
And then you have more passionate people doing things that they're passionate about, and so everything's done with better quality. But anyway, we were talking with Hansi today, and what was he we were talking about metamodernism, and I'm not going to spoil our awesome interview and all the things that we have coming up about that. We were talking about, so we have modernism, postmodernism, and then postmodernism, but metamodernism came along and said, hey, maybe instead of just dissecting instead of just dissecting modernism and saying where it's wrong, let's tear it down and rebuild it.
Right.
That's metamodernism, is we are the makers of our own society.
Right.
In a nutshell. And
not just analysts looking at it over there as it's occurring to them.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you're not a victim of society. You are society. Society would not exist without the individuals living in it.
Right.
And so this new mindset, and we were philosophizing and using a lot of big words and listening to Hansi go on and on. And I was like, okay, but how does metamodernism help a single mom working 2 jobs?
The proletariat.
And he said, I don't think it does directly.
Right.
I don't think single moms working 2 jobs are studying metamodernist philosophy. I think that the single mom working 2 jobs is able to send her child to a school that is operating on metamodern principles.
Or just has a teacher that read the book.
Right.
That is working from a different perspective.
Such as a Montessori school, where kids are trained how to properly use real dishes, how to properly use real scissors, how to be agents of their own making in their own lives, rather than consumers. Montessori schools are training children to be agents rather than consumers.
Right.
Creators rather than consumers. And so that just got me thinking, because basically it kind of sounded a little pretentious.
Right.
Like it was like we're basically saying not everybody should be philosophers.
Not everybody, it's not their gig. It's not the gig for everybody.
And I was like, I think I know many people who would be offended if we said it's okay that you're not going to be a philosopher.
Right.
They'd be like, I can be a philosopher if I want to, and like I don't have a desire. So it's like it came out of this. I'm just going to read
your notes.
Can everyone be King Arthur? Can everyone be Merlin? We're taught that everyone can be king if they like. We are in a vast denial of ecosystems in the US today. There needs to be algae in the pond to nourish the tadpoles, so there needs to be civilians for the Knights of the Round Table to save. We don't like to think that we couldn't be king if we wanted to be king. Some people actually don't want to be king.
Right.
Have we in the West perhaps been brainwashed that we should want to be king if we could, to endear us to the position of the king himself, to enable us to empathize more with the position of the king?
Sounds like a conspiracy.
Have we? You can't describe the bee without mentioning the flower. Who is at the top of that food chain? Is the food chain also an invention of modern Western human hierarchical society? Does the bee think of itself as better than the flower? Does the mushroom think of itself as better than the tree that it grows in? Did the tree think of itself as higher up on the food chain than the squirrel that it provided housing for? Or does the squirrel think of itself as higher up on the food chain than the trees that it leaps freely between? Who is more important, the man who designed the food containers or the man who takes the food containers to the dump every week? I think there have been some principles that have been seeped into modern U.S. society that are, like I said at the beginning, denials of ecosystems.
Yes.
We think of ourselves as separate from the planet and special, and that idea informs all of our roles. We arrange society into value of the roles. Like, I used to play the Oregon Trail video game as a child, and you could pick what job you had at the beginning of the game. You were picking how many children you had, what job you had, what time of year you were going to leave Kansas City to go on the Oregon Trail.
Right.
And it was arranged, in my entire life I experienced this. It was arranged by better jobs to worse jobs. And it was like doctor at the top and like teacher at the bottom. And it was arranged, these jobs were arranged in the Wild Wild West game as if they were the modern equivalent and the modern judgment of whether or not those jobs were valuable. I think it's important. I think that much as we understand that an entire pond, some people understand this, a lot of people are in denial of this, an entire pond is an ecosystem where everything is working together and balancing each other. And if one part of that ecosystem is taken out, the rest of the pond fails.
It can.
A lot of people want a pond without lilies in it, or cattails. Cattails.
Right.
Are they called cattails?
Sure.
Well, whatever.
They
want a pretty pond, not a mushy pond. And it's like, well, but the dragonflies need those things to land on, in order, like, and so it's this concept that we can maybe chew on and figure out how to inhabit this concept humbly and without taking offense, that not every person will be a king and not every person will be a philosopher, and that inhabiting your role can be a joyful thing.
I remember that unraveling in my own brain.
Gosh.
When I thought, okay, I'm going to be a rock star of some sort, whatever, rich and famous. I'm just going to shoot for the rich. I was raised on stupid TV shows that told you that everything was about being rich and famous. So that was the working goal. And then to go pursue it and then run into the folks that were in positions that I thought I was aspiring to and realize I really didn't want to have them over for dinner, even though they were rich and famous, was pause for consideration of maybe what I was doing and how I was going about it. And I began to take a more organic approach, which is my first step was, maybe the wizard. You have the king, and the king is everything, but maybe the king's an idiot and a buffoon, and the wizard is the guy that actually runs the show.
But everybody isn't Merlin.
But everybody isn't Merlin, right? And some people like to farm. I like to farm. I like to go put things in the ground and really enjoy the stuff coming out of the ground. Yep. I think that is a totally viable, necessary function as a human.
And you don't think less of yourself for being a person that enjoys farming.
Right. Our culture has a very strange way of categorizing folks in levels of importance. And I think that's what's been really interesting about this particular scenario that we're in right now, is it's been really wonderful to watch everybody say, those checkers at the grocery store?
Yeah.
I think they're necessary.
Yeah.
They are very necessary. We didn't know it we didn't realize it until just now. We looked at those people who are handling money from possible carriers all day long, or stocking the shelves and doing the thing and making sure that we can go do our thing and run home. Meanwhile, they're at the epicenter of the hub. They're in one of the most dangerous places I think you could be, aside from a hospital.
Touching everything.
So I think this is the idea of everybody being a king is an antiquated idea that I think deserves some scrutiny.
Well, where did it come from? I feel like, and I really can only speak to the U.S.
I think it's the democratic idea that there are no kings, so everybody's a king, right? There's nobody to come and crush you. Yeah, everybody's special. Everybody gets a trophy.
Gosh, I think we need to unpack this conversation further in the future. I think maybe getting into the U.S. chief principle of choice. You should have freedom of choice. You should get to be king if you want to be king. I think it's hard to talk around the different roles that we have in our human ecosystem.
So
even if we were to get people to the point of understanding that humanity is an ecosystem working within the greater ecosystem of the planet, I think it would also be really difficult to talk around, so who manages the ebb and flow of the power in society and the roles? if one person's king and the second person is the advisor Merlin to the king, and then there are 15 or 20 knights of the round table and the ladies in waiting to the queen, and then there are a bunch of civilians living in all of the towns surrounding Camelot, what if one of those civilians wants to be something else? They should be able to if they want to.
I think that was the promise of the country that was sold to me as a kid.
Yeah.
That was the promise, is that
You have the choice for upward mobility.
You're not barred by class.
Gosh. And I disavow class.
Yeah.
Personally. But I think upward mobility is also a false premise, like the food chain. It really only came to me today, this idea that we as humans, human animals, went to the other animals on the planet and arranged the way that they all eat each other in a chart. Who eats who? When was that invented? When did we arrange the planet by who eats who?
Well, we gave that up for dollar signs. Now everything has a dollar value.
Right. That's also a kind of who eats who,
It
unfortunately.
is a who eats who.
Because the more money you have, the more money you can have.
Yeah, it's hard. There's a lot of people who cannot look at a thing without, is that valuable or not valuable, and put a dollar on it. That's dirty, that's not valuable.
Right.
That's shiny, that's valuable.
Right. Yeah, so.
We almost ate the whole hour already.
That's great. We have 5 minutes left before Big Dan C comes in with
10 minutes.
Well, 5 minutes before we stop talking and let Big Dan C come in to set up for Audio Hallucinations, which is a great audio show. And for those of you that are listening on our Facebook or Twitch live stream, you can continue to hear great music for the rest of the evening from a community radio station staffed by real people on butteamericaradio.org/stream.
Yeah, we have a show coming up on Sunday from 4 to 6, our usual Sunday slot. We're hoping to have the interview that we did with Hansi Freinhoff.
A little piece of it, little snack.
Writer of 2 books, The Listening Society and Nordic Ideology.
Which you can find out more about on Metamoderna.
Metamoderna.org. These are 2 books in a series of 6 books that are, I like the idea of somebody spending their time trying to figure out how we might get along and do it a little better.
Right.
We might be able to upgrade the system.
A few people do a lot of work and then they spread it around to a larger group of people that do some work, and then pretty soon we're all benefiting from the new system.
Yeah, so we're hoping to have excerpts. We'll have a series. We'll be pulling out little bite-sized chunks to unpack.
A new foreign correspondent.
That was about an hour's worth of straight unfurling of
download
the meta-modernism and ideas around it, and I think we can easily take 5-10 minutes of that each week and turn it into a 2-hour show. There's a lot to unpack there. In terms of not focusing on the train wreck or the car wreck, but in this moment right now, we have some time.
Who's we and what time?
You and I.
What?
You and I have some time to unpack that and to have the conversation about it. Like, things may get weird in another week.
Right.
Nobody knew we were going to be here this day, this week, last week. Nobody knew that this was what the world was going to look like. So right now, it's unsettling, but we have the time to maybe try to lay out some ideas about how to use this pause for something more, for something that might improve the system.
I'd like to share a meditation that has been really helpful for me over the last 4 years. For those of you that don't know, I made the choice to leave a very strict evangelical Christian group 4 years ago, which meant that I had to leave an unhappy marriage, leave a church that I had grown up in, and basically my parents stopped talking to me and kept my siblings from really communicating with me.
To be excommunicated from a blood family, yeah.
The entire group, all the friends, all the family members.
Yep.
And I went from an environment where I knew what was right and wrong, and I knew who was in charge, and I knew what I needed to do to get to heaven, and I knew what I needed to do, what words I should follow to know that I was doing the right thing, and what words I should follow to know if somebody else wasn't doing the right thing. It was very clear. It was very safe. And I moved beyond that environment into the vast world beyond evangelical Christianity. The billions of people out there that don't follow those strict rules for reality.
Mm.
And I wasn't scared. I'm not a very fear-based person, but I think I had a lot of low-level anxiety that I didn't realize. And what I needed to know, I needed to find a way to be okay with how things were happening. Since I had moved beyond God is in charge and he is controlling everything that is happening.
Right.
Because that was the old way of thinking, was that the God from the Bible is in charge of the whole universe and he knows what's happening. And suddenly, wait, who knows what's happening and who's causing what's happening? If I'm not abiding by those rules anymore, then how on earth am I supposed to know what's cause and effect? Do I cause horrible things to happen to myself?
Right.
Does God allow horrible things to happen to me? Is there some other God or aliens or robots running the thing? We don't know.
Right.
We really don't know. And an analogy came to me that I've also found really soothing in this time of global pandemic, which is the analogy of the river.
All right.
We as matter and energy in the universe are flowing through a river of time.
Okay.
Linear, depending on your perception.
Could be curvy.
Could be curvy. But we're in the river, and the river is going to go wherever it goes. A lot of people find rivers to be really lovely and soothing and spend their summers floating down a river. Imagine yourself in an inner tube floating down the river of time-space. You are in general not in control of where the river goes. You are in control of how you behave in the river, whether you're trying to paddle upstream against where the river's trying to go, whether you're trying to go from side to side across the river, whether you're going to avoid things that you see coming towards you in the river up ahead, or whether something scrapes your bum from underneath and you never saw it coming.
Right.
But you're in the river and you're going to keep flowing forward unless you get some sort of magical, mystical outboard motor to send you back upstream through time.
Right.
You can fight it and use up all of your energy fighting the flow of the river.
Resisting the flow.
Resisting the river, or you can just be in the river and appreciate and accept and acknowledge that things happen in the course of the flow of the river and you, in general, don't have any control over it. And that can be just as comforting as an environment that I like, the one I grew up in, where you think somebody is in complete control of everything. Either everything happens for a reason or nothing happens for a reason, and both of those things can be comforting. And so
or disturbing.
Well,
right.
Yeah. Depending, if you're trying to self-soothe,
right,
you can meditate on the idea of the river and the fact that it is going where it's going to go, and you are going to flow along with it. And like they say, is it better to strive and strive and strive and strive and strive and then suddenly die, or have a really great time and then suddenly die? And you get to choose that. You get to choose if you have a good time until you die, whenever you die, or if you have a stressful time until you die, whenever you die.
I broke it down for myself by saying it's not what happens, it's how I deal with what happens. It's not what's going on, it's how I deal with what's going on.
Yeah.
And we have those choices.
You always have a choice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening in today, guys. We got to hand the radio over to Big Dan C. I hope some of the things we've been talking about today on Post-Orthodoxy are helpful. Dark and I will be back on Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. And if you're interested in more content in between the shows, we also have an Instagram / @Post-Orthodoxy.
Yeah, and I got a song here to play us out.
I would love to hear that.
From the album Mass Education by St. Vincent.
Mass Education?
Mass Education.
Okay.
We have a track called Mass Seduction.
Which is just that thing rolled into one word.
MASSEDUCTION. Yes, Mass Seduction. By St. Vincent. I think it's one of my favorite songs of that year, a couple of years ago, 2017, I guess. The line in there, "I can't turn off what turns me on." I think it's an interesting look at our current media landscape.
This is also a meditation.
Thanks for playing, folks.
I'm ready to
I'll push a button.
play the song. We'll see you guys again soon. Let the gentleman in.
Yes.